Mrs. Caulfield, we're ready.
All right, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are happy to be bringing our students back in pre-K to 2. And give me 1 second here to start presenting. Mr. Simmons, can we see the...
Yes, you're good to begin.
All right, thank you. So 2 weeks ago, our county was put into the yellow zone, which meant for us that we had to pause long enough to see if we could maintain our testing requirement from New York State, from the governor's office. So just a reminder before we get started that our #1 goal is to have our students back in our in-person hybrid model in the safest manner possible. That has been our goal since March. So at this point, we've had 2 weeks of testing capacity with our staff to see what can we do and can we add more to the load of our nursing staff. And our nurses, we have 18 nurses, they have been phenomenal in this process, and we're asking them to do a little bit more so that we can get our kids back in our nest. So you'll see on our screen that we're starting with our youngest learners, our littlest learners. I've been calling them for the last week or so as we determined that we could bring some students back into our buildings. We really need them to have these foundational building blocks for them to be able to be successful for the rest of their educational career. So we're starting with our Head Start pre-K and our kindergartners, our first graders, and our second graders. And then you'll see some additional special education classes, specific classes that we're bringing back. So there's an integrated co-teaching class, preschool class at Severn. Students in our 1211, 811 programs at Severn, students in our 812 program and 12131 programs at Smith in the high school, and our 812s at the middle school. So what this requires of us is to bring back about 154 more students. And while we remain in the yellow zone, which you can still see here on the chart, we have to test 20% of our students and staff. Anyone who enters the building in a week's time. So from Monday to Friday, we need to take 20% of the actual people that are in the school and randomly test those people. Right now, our numbers are coming down, so we're hopeful that we're going to come out of the yellow zone, but it won't be for the next couple of weeks. As we continue to give more tests and add in more negative test results through our testing, those numbers will continue to be driven down. So for us, our test capacity, you'll see here, for the following weeks that we're looking at the next 3 weeks, November 9th through the 13th, which is this week, we're going to bring back our B cohort students. So our B cohort students across all 8 buildings, that'll be 78 additional students in the building. The following week, we'll have our A and B cohort kids in, so that'll add on 154 additional kids again over the 8 buildings. And then the next week, we'll have our cohort A students in, as that is Thanksgiving week. What we're going to try to do, because of the days of the week that students come, like our A cohort only is there on Monday and Tuesday, and our B students only there on Thursday and Friday, we're going to take 20% of each of those groups. So there'll be 20% of the A cohort, 20% of the B cohort, and again, 20% of our staff. So although it's not perfectly random over the course of the 5 days, we really need our students to be in the building on the days that we'll be testing. So this is as clean as we can make it for our 20% random testing. So you'll see here how we're meeting that 20% COVID requirement. So you'll see an employee count on our slide, as well as the student count in each building. And then you'll see how many students in each building and staff will be tested. So that first number, if you look at Carter School, on the A cohort, B cohort week, we'll be bringing in 153 students into the building. We will need to provide 49 tests, 31 of them being students in the cohort A and B. You'll see the numbers at the high school look very low. Again, there's only one class coming back at that building with 7 students, so we'll only need to test 1. So overall, from the first 2 weeks to now, we're just about doubling how many people we're going to test. So the first 2 weeks, we tested 217 staff each week. And bringing our students back in the A and B cohort, we will be testing 368 students and staff a week. And remember, those increments come in 15-minute increments to provide the testing. So a message was sent and mailed to families on Friday. So if you were in the pre-K to 2 family set, you received not only the letter, but also the consent form in the mail. It was mailed out that day. So some of you may have gotten it on Saturday. Some of you may have received it in the mail today. If not, it will be there tomorrow. In addition, we emailed an email home to all families, pre-K to 12, that had the letter attached as well as an email discussing what we were doing. So there were plenty of notification. If you didn't receive that notification, we'd like you to contact your building administration so that we can go into our school tool records and make sure that we have the correct information for you. We'll be using the Binex cards for testing. Our Binex cards are simple little square cards where the nurse in our school, the nurses in our school district are going to test the student with a swab. And I'm going to show you a video here in just a second of what that testing is going to look like. And then they put the swab on a card, and we wait for the results to pop up. You get a line if it's positive and no line if it's negative. So one of our students and his family were kind enough to help us with the video of this. So I'm going to take a minute and show you the video.
Hi, Hop Nation. This is Nurse Ann, and today we're going to be performing a Binex COVID test. So in order to complete the test safely, I will be needing to put on a gown, an N95 mask, a face shield, and a pair of gloves. The nurse completing the test will look a little different in their PPE, but remember, it's still just us here to help you stay safe. So to perform the test, we're going to open up the test kit. We will take the cotton swab and swab just inside the end of your nose. We will do 5 swabs on one side of your nose and 5 swabs on the other side of your nose. Once that is complete, we will take the swab and insert it into the bottom circle of the booklet, and then close the booklet and seal it. After 15 minutes, we will be able to read the results. As you're getting the test completed, it might make your nose feel a little funny and even make your eyes water, but it won't hurt. After the 15 minutes, we will read the booklet. If your test is negative, we'll send you back to class so you can finish your day here at school with your teacher and your friends. If the test is positive, we will contact your families to come and pick you up, and you will continue your learning remotely from home.
So I want to give a huge shout out to Rollin for being our volunteer, and we could not do any of this without Nurse Ann. So many questions came over the weekend about when can more students return. And while we're in the yellow zone, we must be able to test 20%. So we're going to continue to monitor our testing capacity over the next 3 weeks. Really, next week will give us the biggest picture because we'll be able to test A and B. And if we have more capacity, then we're going to add additional grade levels and programs back into our buildings. So we'll be looking at our grade 3 through 5 students, then our special programs, and middle school and high school students after that. Again, at any time that we leave the yellow zone, we will have all of our students back in that model immediately. So just some timelines. I've already gone through the first week with us. That was last week. So tonight we're having our town hall. Tomorrow, if you are going to have your student be chosen for the first round of random testing, you're going to hear from your building principal tomorrow. They're going to call each family that falls in that 20% and let the families know then that their student would be chosen on Thursday for their first COVID test, that first random testing. So right now I'll take any questions, and Carrie Elsasser is going to help me with those.
Okay, a question regarding testing. At 20%, do we know how often one child could be tested?
It is random. So over the course of the last 2 weeks, we have seen a couple people get chosen more than once. We will look to avoid that with our students. But eventually, over the course of 4, 5, 6 weeks, there is the potential for a child to be tested more than once.
Question about if the student does not have a signed consent form, there wasn't consent given, is the student allowed back into school?
So what we're doing from information from New York State Department of Health and Steuben County Department of Health is that the student should not be in school if we do not have consent to test them. We don't want to be in a situation where we have to send a student home, so we are asking for consent. There is always the option for the virtual Cohort C model if you don't feel comfortable with the testing.
Are we able to opt out of sending our child back to school until there's no longer any testing?
Yes, so you as a family can choose virtual instruction, the Cohort C as we call it. What we would like you to do though in the next couple of days is to contact your building administrator so that they know that you're making that shift and so that we can record that correctly before students come back on Thursday.
A question relative to surveying parents. How come a survey wasn't put out prior to the decision of having testing in our school? What made us lean towards testing?
We don't have a choice about testing. Testing is a New York State requirement when you're in the yellow zone.
This is about during testing. If a child is pulling away, reluctant, scared, and or crying when the nurse is trying to swab them, how much will the nurse keep trying?
We will not put any of our students into a traumatic event. So we will work with them before the testing starts to make sure that they're comfortable with the test before it happens.
Okay. Will a parent, I think you talked about this earlier, will a parent be notified before their child is tested?
Yes.
And also, will they be notified if the result is negative?
Yes, so right now our plan is that each Tuesday, the B cohort students' families will be notified, and each Friday, the A cohort students' families will be notified. And the result, families would be contacted with a result if the result was positive.
Got it. Question relative to scheduling. What point of the day will testing be done?
Testing will happen all day for the B students on Thursdays and for the A students on Mondays. And majority of staff will be on Wednesdays. And we'll also look to fill in with staff on Tuesdays and Fridays.
Okay, I think you can keep going from here.
Okay. Actually, that's the end of the presentation. So if there are no additional questions.
We have 3 more. I'm sorry to interrupt. We're pacing them.
That's okay.
Okay. One more I see. It's relative to a 12-1-1 class and why they are not returning on November 12th. So I did receive a message here from our PPS director, and if parents have questions relative to specific classes, they are welcome to call our PPS department tomorrow. Question relative to returning, can we wait until there's no testing without completely switching to Cohort C permanently? I'm under the impression that once you do change to Cohort C that it's permanent.
No, moving to Cohort C during this specific yellow zone, we are not going to require families to stay in that. They can come back into the A and B model once we're out of the yellow zone, if that's what the families are choosing to do while in the yellow zone.
This goes back to the testing, and if a 6-year-old is crying and refuses to be tested, are they sent home or are they able to stay at school?
We will allow them to stay at school.
Question regarding if choosing to move to Cohort C and the family decided to have the students stay home until testing was no longer required, will the state be forcing all students back into schools and demand that they all be tested anyway?
There's no testing requirement when you're not in the yellow zone. And families in our district will not be forced to come back to school. You have the option always of our 100% virtual model.
Question relative to testing and if a parent can be present.
We will allow parents to be present. One thing that we ask, though, we won't be able to schedule around parents' schedules. So each student will be given a time to test, and the parent would have to make themselves available during that time. Because we need to give 368 tests, we won't be able to have families sign up for times. They will be assigned a time.
A question relative to why the little kids, why are we starting with pre-K through 2nd grade? Wouldn't it be better for our seniors and juniors to return first?
No. In discussions around which students we want to have come back first, we need our students to be able to read and have basic understanding of math before they're in 3rd grade. Research-based studies show that reading level, reading on grade level by 3rd grade is really important, and our students need to have more contact time with their teachers to be able to get there.
Okay, question relative to privacy. Where do my child's personal medical records get released to after testing? I would imagine that HIPAA laws do apply.
All HIPAA laws do apply. The results of the test are shared with the Department of Health. And it follows then our normal procedure for tracing. If a student was positive, we would follow our normal Steuben County Department of Health tracing and protocols around that.
Question relative, if a child in a class tests positive, what about the other kids that were in the class with them? What would the next steps be?
So we'll follow the same procedures we would as if they were in school. We trace with Steuben County Department of Health. They let us know who should be quarantined, and then we contact that family first, and then the Steuben County Department of Health contacts them after.
A question relative to some specifics with HIPAA. Should every student have a HIPAA waiver to avoid privacy liabilities?
That is not necessary for this. Students are all covered under HIPAA law.
I believe that's all the questions. If anybody has any additional questions, they can enter into the chat, but I think that I'm caught up. There was a little bit of a lag for a second.
Thanks, Carrie. Also, if you have additional questions after tonight, please send them to ask@cpp.com. I will get back to you immediately if you have questions, especially after we're done tonight.
I think we're good. I think that's it.
All right. Thank you all for joining tonight. And again, feel free to ask us any questions, ask@cpp.com. Have a good night.